I'm driven by fear. 100% of my life is fear-based. I had to buy clothes to go to school, and if I wanted clothes to go to school, I had to go get a job and earn money to buy clothes to go to school. If I wanted a car, I had to go to school to earn money, or go to work to earn money to buy a car.
Welcome to Hello Grow,
Utah's #1 growth podcast.
I'm Court Brady.
I am Carlos Souza.
And today we have Bill Phillips with us.
Thank you for having me.
Stoked to have you, Bill.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
So, Bill, your resume, if we just say one thing, everyone will continue listening to the entire thing. You dropped out of college and built a business from the ground up that got to $120 million of annual sales.
Correct.
Okay, let's just jump in.
I don't know, not calling dropping out of college when you only went one semester. I
just like saying that because I feel like I'm in good company.
It's for the thumbnail. It's for the
college dropout.
Bill Gates and us.
Yeah, it puts us in the same group.
Bill, I'm pumped to have you on the podcast today.
Yeah.
We've known each other for a couple of years. Let's just start real early. Like, when did the first seeds of entrepreneurship expose themselves in your life?
When I think back about my life as a young kid, I was selling, everybody mowed lawns, everybody shoveled walks, and we didn't have a lot of anything. Money was something that was, my parents did a good job spoiling us on Christmas and on birthdays, but other than that, it was quite slim. We played a lot of sports, and that's basically what we spent money on as a family. So if I wanted or needed anything, I had to pay for it myself. And that became evident early on when I learned how to ski, that I had to earn my own money to go skiing. And I'll age myself here, but it was a ski pass at Solitude was $8. And it was $1 each way to ride the ski bus from Valley Fair Mall to Solitude. So $10 bill, and all I had to do was shovel 2 walks for that. You think about that, $5 to shovel somebody's entire driveway. And my neighbors would, pay me to do that type of thing because I guess maybe I was so cheap to do it. But from there, my real entrepreneur was selling donuts door to door. I'd carry a wire basket around my neck, and I would knock on the doors, and I would sell the half a dozen donuts for $1.25. It was called Spud Nuts, if you guys remember Spud Nut donuts. And anyway, I would go door to door, and I'd sell them, and I would call my provider, or the guy who had brought the basket off in the morning and a full basket of donuts, and I would haul ass, if I can't swear. So I'd haul ass around the neighborhood as fast as I could and surrounding neighborhoods and sell them as fast as I could. Then I would run home and call him and have him bring another basket full of donuts. And if I could sell them all as fast as I could before a certain time, there were a lot of stay-at-home moms back then and kids, and it was summertime. And I would get 25 cents for every half a dozen I would sell. So $1.25, pay in cash. I'd keep the quarter. And I would sell at least 2 baskets a day of donuts, and carrying it around my neck and walking from door to door. And I did really well doing that.
The muscle stayed on you. Haven't lost it.
Yeah, like a pole horse.
So that was it. That was the early days selling donuts door to door. It's funny, you have door to door as a young kid. We used to. Well, in college, I did door-to-door as like a pseudo career, but when we were little kids, we would wrap rocks in tin foil and sell them as pieces of silver, and parents thought it was so cute to have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old selling gravel wrapped in tin foil for $1 a piece. So my brother and I would go make $20 and just go to the candy store. It's interesting how many people just have that bug, and all 3 of us in this room had a mentality from our parents that if you want it, like if you have money, you can buy it. If you don't have money, you can't buy it.
Right.
Did you raise your children with that same mentality?
No. I would say that early on, we didn't have, growing up or raising my children, we didn't have a lot of money. I was working multiple jobs, and it was very tight and difficult. I'd work 60, 70 hours a week. And my wife was also working, or at least when the kids were old enough to go to school, she was working. And at that time, it was everything we could do to make sure we could put food on the table, and they were really little. But I made a promise to each of my children that they would never have to pay for college, as long as because college was never stressed in my house as a high level of importance. And I thought that if I couldn't go, I would make sure my children went to, at least they would have options. So when they were little, their job was to do well in school. And as long as they did well in school and participated and stayed active in sports and activities and bolstered their quote unquote resume as a child, I owned them until they graduated from college with a bachelor's degree. So the deal was, as long as you stayed in school, you could do anything and everything you wanted, and I paid for it through the 4 years. But if you took 4 years and a semester, the next semester was on you. So my oldest daughter, probably jumping ahead here, but my oldest daughter kind of took that to challenge, and she transferred a couple of times, and she finished her 4 years in 6 years. But I only paid for 4, and she was on the hook for the other 2. My middle daughter scholarshiped at University of Alabama on soccer scholarship, so it was easy for her. We paid for her to be an out-of-state tuition, and it was a 50% scholarship. We covered the rest. My youngest daughter paid very close attention, and she finished school in 4 years, but she also did a couple of study abroads in France. She lived it to the fullest, sorority, the whole deal, and she lived it to the max. So, through time, they saw that Dad wasn't bluffing, and
I love it. So you do these entrepreneurial things. Tell us your transition out of high school and into the professional world.
Yeah, I was going to go to college to be a nurse, but early on, I had a girlfriend in high school, and I was really big in playing baseball, and it was go to college and play baseball in college or get my girlfriend pregnant, and I did not play baseball in college, so now I have a 36-year-old daughter and wouldn't trade that for anything. So everything from there after high school was really from what my parents taught me. My dad taught me early on is, as you said, you have to make your own way, and my dad never borrowed me $5, and he never co-signed on a loan for me. That was a real big deal to him. He wasn't going to help me unless I worked my hardest to help myself. And my dad was really, really driven, not as in the regards to success, but really driven to be a hard worker and be responsible. If he had to be to work at 8, he left the house at 6. He was always to work at his desk at 7, and always worked an hour or 2 extra throughout the day, every day, to be better at his job. Now, he wasn't driven in the sense to own or run a company, but he was driven to prove and provide for his family. And to do that was to show that he was a hard worker, and he was taught that by his father. And my dad instilled that into me, was to work hard, and if you work hard, what you go after, you will get. So,
can we talk a little bit about overcoming challenges? I love the success story, and I love the more difficult the challenge, the more glorious the triumph or victory. It's not an easy thing. Like, I can't imagine the trajectory of my life if I would have had a kid in high school or immediately after high school. And it's hard enough to go on and do, like, very, very few people that have ever lived have built a company from 0 to 120 million in revenue. What advice do you have for people that have challenges that are significant and viable and justifiable to say, yeah, you maybe don't need to live up to your full potential because you have some struggles that you're having to deal with?
Yeah, I'm not going to say something so profound and fill people with BS. The real thing is I'm driven by fear. 100% of my life is fear-based. I had to buy clothes to go to school, and if I wanted clothes to go to school, I had to go get a job and earn money to buy clothes to go to school. If I wanted a car, I had to go to school to earn money, or go to work to earn money to buy a car. So, in that regard to having a child when I'm 19 years old, the only thing I can do is what my dad taught me, is work my ass off. I've got now at that time a wife and a daughter, and I'm completely scared. I'm a child having a child, and I didn't know anything else to do but to work harder, longer to make sure that I was able to provide for that little girl.
So what did you go do?
Right out of high school, I worked for a moving company as a furniture mover for 6 years. And then after that, I went to work for Utah Power at the time, which is Rocky Mountain Power today, reading meters. Then I went back to the moving company to run operations and sales. They had a DBA that was doing city delivery freight. And I grew that city delivery freight by 70% year over year, each year for the subsequent 3 years or 2 years. And I was doing very well by doing sales, by running the business. And then during the day, a portion of the day, I'd go out and knock on businesses to try to gain and grow freight sales for the company. And I think that part of that is really the catalyst that helped catapult me forward in life. One, I really like sales. When I worked in high school, I worked at a hardware store and I did sales. And then working for this company, I was doing sales, and I really took to sales very well. I had that ability to close. I wasn't afraid to ask for an order, and I was pretty, not to boast, but I was very charismatic, so I could befriend the people who were the buyers or the people who I worked with, and they didn't feel like I was there to knock on their door to get something from them. I built a good relationship with my clients, and it grew and grew that way. And one day I'm a big skier, and I ski every year on my birthday in January, and I'm riding a chairlift with a gentleman who owns a packaging company. And he started talking to me, and running a moving company, you use a lot of packaging, boxes to move people with, package up their goods and move them across country. And he said, hey, I'd love to come and quote you on your packaging. I said, sure, I would love that. Well, he worked very hard to try to get me pricing. He never could get me the pricing I needed. But in that time, while he was selling me, I was selling him, and I ended up selling him a freight contract to move all of his packaging all over the country.
Feels so true.
Yeah, and intentional or unintentional. But he found that very, very impressive and offered me a position. And at that time, I was making $29,000 a year. And he offered me a job, 100% commission. And I said, no, my family deserves me to bring home money and put it on the table. And by that time now, I'm in my second marriage and have 3 children. I had 3 children when I was 26 years old. So I said, my family deserves me to put money on the table. And this is something that he said to me that sticks with me. He says, no, your family deserves for you to make as much money as you can make on your own. And I listened to him, and I said, no. And he came back because he was relentless, and just like me as a sales guy, he wanted to close and get the win. So he came back and he offered me $36,000 a year. I'm like, wow, okay, I'll take it. The deal was that anything I sold above a certain dollar that covered my salary, he would pay me a commission on. But it was a brand new packaging company. So for the first 6 months, I was setting up their credit program. I was setting up their accounting program. I was setting up all these things. I'm 29 years old, and I'm setting these things up. And I'm also keeping a relationship with the people who I sold freight to. Well, all those freight people that I sold to were in manufacturing. Yeah. So I went back to them and started selling them packaging. Closed 100% of those accounts that I had relationships with. Now I'm selling boxes and bags to the people who make the sacrament cups for the LDS Church. At that time, before the church made it themselves, and so on and so on. And I worked there. After 6 months, I doubled my salary. And 6 months after that, I doubled it again. And so I worked there for a year. I worked there for 2 years. And a headhunter came and found me. And I went to work for another packaging company at that time who was much more larger, had multiple locations in the West. And I went there, and in 6 months, they had 14 sales guys. I was number 3 in sales. And it's just something I like to do. But the thing is I liked the most was educating myself and learning about the products that I was selling. So I knew the applicable reason. The first packaging company I worked for, he was very diligent about you one of his phrases was 7 to 7 lunch in the car. You work from 7 in the morning until 7 at night, and you educate yourself. He would empty a filing cabinet, throw all the brochures and all the information on the floor at that time, and make me come in on a Saturday and pick it all up and read every single thing and before I put it back in the filing cabinet. And he would do that over and over again. He would fly me to places that I had to go and learn how to not just sell a machine that stretch wraps a pallet. He made me go to the school where I had to learn how to build one of those machines so I could service it. And I ended up selling Shasta Beverage, the largest contract they ever wrote for stretch wrapping to wrap their pallets of sodas. And it was really, really a great thing. Didn't like the company, but it was a great experience.
So I do have a follow-up question there. So you kind of talked a little bit about being motivated by fear. And then you I think I only know maybe a very selected, very few people that have tripled their salary in a year like you did. The one thing in common is that every single one of them had a chip on their shoulder. And that I include myself in there. Can you talk a little bit about that? So I actually 2 questions in there. How that kind of gave you that motivation? Like, what kind of fear was that made you triple your salary in a year? And how about people that don't have that chip on their shoulder? Mm-hmm. They don't have that fear. Mm-hmm. What should they do to get that motivation that they currently don't have?
Yeah, so going back, the thing that I think about all the time, and I still do today, is I feel that the road crumbles behind me, right? I don't have this, no matter how hard you work, it seems to be fleeting. And it seems to be fleeting to where you're only as good as your last sell, you get paid on it, and then you have to sell it again, right? And so if you build a rapport with your buyers and you get a contract, those are special moments, but every order is a new order. So I would start out my day every day starting out at 0. And one thing that I've always wanted is I've wanted for things that I didn't grow up with. I watched my mom's car get repossessed in the driveway, and I watched her cry. I watched her go to the credit union and beg every day for them not to take our house. When as a little kid, I watched these things happen, and I just said that I wasn't going to let that happen to me in my life. So that fear of losing always stayed in the back of my mind. And I don't think you have to have that adversity of growing up without, because my parents did such a great job making me feel like we had, Mm-hmm. But I saw them struggling. My mom was a waitress, and when I was a kid, I just said to myself, if I could just make $30,000 a year, I have it licked. I can I got life figured out, which is silly. I didn't intend on doubling my salary, but what I did is I started finding success. And then I got the taste of having the wins from that success. So it made me hungry and want more and more and more. So fear stayed there because I had to keep pushing myself. It wasn't to push myself to have and want and do more, but as a gentleman said to me once a long time ago, he said, my very favorite salesman is a salesman in debt because nobody works harder.
Yes.
And he's not wrong, right? Because he would see me pull up in a new truck. He's like, oh, yeah. You got to go earn the money to keep that truck. And that's a truth. For people who need or don't have motivation, I was having the discussion with my family today, is you can't teach heart. You have to have heart, meaning you have to have drive and desire, and that comes in many different forms and flavors. Mm-hmm. Mine comes all fear-based. Playing baseball was, I didn't want to be the worst player on the team. Playing basketball, I didn't want to sit on the bench. So I wanted to make sure that I was going to work my guts out to be that person who was picked, at recess. I'll take you, and that type of thing. And you don't want to be the last one standing there not being picked. So again, that's fear. Fear of my peers not thinking I'm good enough. Fear of not being a good enough player to even be picked at all. And that's how I've continued to push myself in business, is to be driven in a way that, do I feel like I don't ever think of myself as successful. I think of myself as being good enough to be one of the first ones picked.
It's such an interesting concept because I think it's very contrary to modern, what's pushed on social media of this love and faith and hope-based, future forward thinking, I am enough mentality. And I don't know if you read David Goggins' book.
I know who he is, but no, I have not.
It's called Can't Hurt Me. And I got halfway through that book, and his is anger. Anger drives that man like nothing else, and he is so incredibly angry, and it is such a strong emotion that it has fueled his immense amount of action to just do superhuman things. And I tried that, and I pulled over because my wife and I got in one of the worst fights that we had ever been in, and I threw the book in a dumpster because I'm a chameleon to the books that I read. To the people I hang out with and to the books I read. And I tried the anger. I tried this mentality of just F the world, F everything. I'm going to go get it. And that didn't work for me. And I've tried.
That's not who Court is.
That's not me. That's not me. And I tried to adopt it. And I think people might be listening to this and say, well, I want 120 million in revenue. Fear is working for him. Why isn't it going to work for me? And I think that question of like, how do you have fear or anger or positive emotion? The same thing can hold on contentment if you're so content that you don't go in one direction or the other. So how do people leverage an emotion to action instead of inaction?
Yeah, you talk about paralysis, right? You can paralyze yourself by overanalyzing how you go about achieving success, right?
Or how bad life is going to suck if you fail. And that just like there are literal animals, right, in nature that they have an animal coming to attack them, the lion's coming, and they freeze up and fall, and they just die. And that's it, because they're paralyzed by that fear.
Yeah, I mean, there are moments where I have been paralyzed. There are moments where I can tell you that, you don't go from 0 to 120 overnight, and you sure as heck don't do it easily, and if it comes easy to someone, God bless them. I don't damn anybody for getting success any way they get it. I champion anybody who is wildly successful in any direction, and I want to learn and hear about it just like you gentlemen do. But there are many, many nights where you put your head on the pillow and you don't sleep, or you've signed a personal guarantee and you know that your house is on the line. That's fear beyond what most people comprehend on a daily basis. And I'm not saying that my fear is greater than anyone else's. People can be scared just to go out and get in the car and drive to work, But what happened was, I think what kept me energized, going back to your question, is I had a little taste of success. Whatever modicum of success that was, it was big to me. I mean, I have the chills talking about it now, just knowing that I went from $29,000 a year to $36,000 a year, and this was, 25 plus years ago, 26 years ago. So that was a big jump for me in my life. And to bring home a paycheck to my family that was, as much as I made in 6 months in one paycheck, it was so big, so rewarding. I get choked up even thinking about it. And that little tiny taste was what continued to motivate me, to drive me forward. So there are days, and this in any life, any part of your life, whether you're sitting going to the gym or where you're going to work, is when I would go door to door calling on customers to sell packaging to them, many times I would just sit out in front of this building and not get out of the car. Sometimes I would drive off because sometimes I knew I couldn't bring my A game. And I would drive down the road, and I'd drive a little bit, and then I would turn around and go back because I didn't have a choice. I had to make that sell. And if I wasn't going to make that sell, what is the ripple effect? Do I not go into the next one? Do I not go into the next one? Do I just go back and get an hourly job? I didn't know what cascading negativity would come beyond me not getting out of my car.
I think people don't look at the world as this multiplying effect, but they just say, yeah, if I just do this one thing this one time, like it's not going to be that big of a difference. But if they'd take a second and go through that thought process of a journey of 1,000 steps begins with one step. So watch that first step.
Yeah.
And say, if I do this every day, what is the effect, positive or negative? What's the effect going to be in the long term?
I'd love to hear from both of you guys, because I'm thinking, what do you think is the right question that someone should ask themselves to find what their emotion, their fuel is? Because I'm thinking here, I remember many years ago, I heard this story, and for people that work with me that are listening to this podcast, they're probably sick and tired of me telling this story, because I'm a sales leader, so I'm always kind of trying to motivate with more, commissions and bonuses and challenges and things like that. There's this story of in Brazil, this guy was hired to transport a tank of fish from the beach to São Paulo, so which is 2 hours away, right? And then when he gets to the destination, all fish are dead. And then the guy was like, no, I'm not going to pay you. Like, all fish are dead. But I'm going to give you another chance. You got to go back there tomorrow, and all fish need to get here alive. So this guy's just trying to figure that out. He gets there, and then he buys a little, like, baby sharks. And then he puts those sharks in the tank. And then when he gets to the destination, there's like 10, 20 fish that are dead that the sharks ate, but then thousands alive because they've been running for their lives, and it's creating oxygen in the water, and they lived. So I was told that story many years ago, in the sense of you always have to have a little shark behind you. Like, if maybe some debt is your shark. For me, it has always that in that context, like, all right, I need to move to a bigger house. I need to buy a bigger car, and that will create motivation for me to sell more and to do more. But then a few years ago, when my dad passed, I remember we were looking at his finances and kind of organizing everything, and I learned that my dad lived his whole life with less than 20% of what he made. And I was like, how did he have we always lived with 20% of what he made, and he still managed to be disciplined, motivated, and always wanted more, and create a successful life for his family, right? So what was his motivation? Anyways, so I learned that it's not always debt and more. Every person has their own baby shark, their own shark behind them. So I want to ask you guys, what is, for someone who's listening to the podcast, what are the questions that they should ask themselves to find what's their core motivation?
I'll go first, because we're going to end with your words of wisdom on this to set my opinion straight. This is a really interesting concept for me, because it was fear and lack that drove me to start and grow Aspen. It's pure mercenary play of how do I prove to myself that I'm enough, and how do I stop thinking about how much things cost? Because I hate both of those things, and the idea of not having really sucked. And I think that this, I perceived that it was not ideal. I think that there's this idea that if your life is mid, there's this, I forgot the name, Denzel Washington quote that he says, ease, not hardship, is the greatest hindrance to success. Mm-hmm. If your life doesn't suck enough, if your life is just mediocre and just mid, you're just going to continue going and going and going. But if your life really sucks, and people are going to have horrible outcomes if you don't go and put your nose to the grindstone, then you'll just go do it. That happens. And if you feel like, man, my life is super awful, then you'll go and do that. But then what happened is I got to the end of this road, and I had everything that I had, the wife and the kids and the house and the cars and the passive income, and thought, man, I literally have everything that I said I was doing to avoid. And for me, so I'm really curious of your take on this, Bill. Pain avoidance did not create any positive emotions for me. What it did create from doing all that work is the pain was gone. Like I got rid of that pain, but then I was still left with, what am I going to fill that with? Because I've removed this emotion. What am I going to fill it with? And I've been so used to feeling pain that it came with depression. And last year was the worst year of my, last year was awful. And I had accomplished everything that I had set out to accomplish. And so I feel like now it's having to come with a new purpose that's pulling me in an infinite game, but I haven't dialed in exactly what that core is. But I feel like it goes back to what's going to give me the most amount of energy. And right now for me, it's how do I help other people be successful? That continues to come back for my thing of an energy driver.
Yeah. You said debt, and debt is really, it's not it. It is exactly what you said. I was sick to my stomach when the bill collectors would call my house. When I had my youngest daughter, we didn't have health insurance because at that time my wife was being harassed at work, and I made her quit. So we didn't have insurance for my daughter. So when she was born, we had to pay for her. And so I was the only one working, and I was sick about having the phone ring and my wife or myself answer it, and it was a collector for the phone or for credit cards that we had or something. And so, and I saw myself repeating what my parents had done. Young family. My dad was 19 when he had me. I was 19 when I had my daughter. I had 3 children by 25. My dad had 3 children by 25. And it wasn't something that I was set out to do. In truth, I really thought I'd have one child, maybe. And it wasn't a goal of mine, but that feeling of hearing those calls and knowing that I was going down the same path. And going back to that time, I remember, I'm not joking, I was working 70 hours a week. I would work at a freight company throwing freight at night. I was a non-union worker at that time, and they called me a scab. And I would go to a place called Consolidated Freightways and throw freight on Sunday night. And the thing is, my wife at the time would say, you had to call in to see if you had work. So I was working at the moving company. I was working at a bike store because I was also starting to get into mountain biking. And instead, I couldn't afford a mountain bike, so I'd go work at the bike store to earn the mountain bike, And then I was working at Dillard's Women's Shoes. And then I was working at CF. So I would get off work at the moving company, working all day. I would ride either to the bike store, or I'd come home, change my clothes, and go to Dillard's and work and sell women's shoes. And then I'd get off there, and I would have to call to see if Consolidated Freightways had work for me. And on weekdays, it was 4 hours. And so I'd go at midnight, work 4 hours, or at 10 o'clock, work 4 hours, and still go move furniture all the next day. On Sundays, I'd work on the weekends. I'd work a full 10-hour shift on Sunday night, come home, shower, change my clothes, and go move furniture all day the next day. Not 1 hour and 1 minute of sleep. And I was doing that week over week, and I would pray every week that I didn't get called in on that weekend, and my wife would pray every day that I would get called in because we needed the money that bad. So once I started having a little bit of money where we could pay our bills and the bill collector stopped calling, that's when I knew I'd never wanted to have that happen again.
You refused to be in that situation.
Refused. Yeah, I wasn't going to be a stereotypical, people use their upbringing, their environment, their culture as an excuse. You hear that all the time, right? Mm-hmm. Born in a trailer park, die in a trailer park. And no disrespect to the trailer park or the people who live there, but that's a saying. And I did not want to be my parents and go through that same journey of wondering how long I'd be able to keep my house. So it wasn't the debt, it was the fear of not being able to provide for my family. And sales managers and people would talk to me and say, why are you doing this? Or how do we motivate you? I'm like, you don't have to worry about motivating me. I have a wife and 3 children at home. I'm sorry. No, I have a wife and 3 children at home. I'm motivated enough. because I didn't want to let them down.
Yeah.
I wasn't the accolades I wanted. I didn't want to let my family down.
I think people often also on your point of changing the narrative of breaking the cycle.
Mm-hmm.
This generation is going to break the cycle.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people see how their life has played out to this point, and then they write their future based on their past. Like 26 years old, 3 kids, 1 semester of nursing school. Like the future that would statistically be written is not the future that you ended up living.
Yeah.
And I think I'm positive everyone can go through that moment and say, I refuse to write what's statistically supposed to happen, and I'm going to live a different future. Bill, we talked a little bit about culture as we were talking about this podcast, and just said, what entrepreneurial principle are you most passionate about? You said culture. You said, I got the chills just bringing up culture because I love it, and I think it's so paramount. Can we talk about the inception of Spectrum, what that was, what that turned into, and the role culture played in building that? I know it's a big question. We'll dialogue with you as you go through this experience.
Yeah, when I started Spectrum in 2005, believe it or not, I was fired from my job. And
for what?
You're so I can remember the day very vividly. It was the week before the July 24th weekend. And what I was trying to do was develop a packaging piece that was a cushioning for 4 bottles of juice, like wine or whatever, in 4 wine bottles. And currently they were using styrofoam, like the styrofoam coolers. And they were using 6 truckloads a week of styrofoam to package their 4 bottles. And this was a local multi-level marketing company here in Utah at the time. And I came up with this idea because I knew so much about the type of packaging they were using and how to support it the best, that I could design something that could nest inside of each other, that was fully recyclable, that would, for every 1 truckload I shipped, I would take 6 truckloads of other products off the road. So I would reduce the carbon footprint. It was a fully recyclable product, fully made out of recycled material, and it was the only product that would pass what is considered, it's called ISTA 3, a drop testing to cover your package, fully insure it to ship to destination. So I set off to work with some people to help me do the CAD drawings, to engineer it based off what I wanted. And I developed the product, and I went back and talked to the company about it. Well, my boss heard about it and called me in and said, hey, you're going to take business away from our company. I said, no, I'm actually going to enhance. We can increase our margin. I'm not selling a Me Too item. I'm selling something that's unique. And so he called me. I was out making sales calls, and he called me and told me to bring my car, my credit card, and my laptop. He said I was fired. Mind you, I was one of the top salespeople at the company at the time. And so I took my car, and I called my friend who I'd been doing side business with. His name is Greg, who I love and adore greatly. He'd been on me for about 4 years to start my own thing with him. And he's had some success on his own, being an entrepreneur. And he liked my drive. We had a customer called Symbiosis. And if you guys remember the product, it was a little neoprene sleeve lip balm on a leash. Hooked to your zipper, had branding on it, could be private labeled. They were out of Kaysville. And I designed their store displays for them, and I won a couple of national point-of-purchase display awards with designing these displays. Engineered the display myself, had my sample guy make me samples for it, and then it went into production, and we sold them all over every retail, Walmart, Walgreens, all over the United States. And it was wildly successful. Their product was successful, but the way the package was caught a lot of attention in the retail stores. So we were having a lot of success doing that. And then my partner, Greg, who had his own sew factory in China, had about 300 sewers there. He was making swaddling products for a product called Bundle Me Baby out of Logan, and was having good success. So I brought him this leash, and I said, can we make this? And he said, sure. So I went back to my customer who I was selling packaging to and said, how about we make all of your product. You just be a lip balm manufacturer. And that's how we set off to start Spectrum. So I bought a little tiny Ford Ranger truck with a shell on it, and I went door to door selling to my customers, and then I went to the vendors and picked up the product in my truck, and I went and delivered it. So I was sales, I was sourcing, I was a delivery guy, and this was in August 1st of 2005. And
you registered your complaints with yourself?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, figured out financing on my own for my own. And it was a lot. It was scary. I was scared as could be. I told my business partner at the time, Greg, that I will never owe you $1. You'll always owe me 10, because he was the one funding it. He started the business with $100,000 of his own money. He believed in me that much, and in 6 months we'd paid that back. And by the end of the year, we had done $600,000 in sales.
Wow.
Fear. I just put my kids in private school. I was making exceptional money, and I had a new home, fairly new home at the time, and I was scared as could be. Scared that I'd have to go back to my family and tell them that I'd not only lost my job, but now we have to sell the house, and I don't know what we're going to do. So I went out and started hauling ass, and I proved that I can do it on my own. I took all the customers I could with me that I had built relationships with from each of the subsequent jobs that I changed, that headhunters had taken me to. I'd taken 100% of my customers, and in my last job, my company said, I guarantee you will take none. And I took all. And so at that time, Spectrum was really a packaging and product development company. So you came to us with an idea, kind of like a Shark Tank idea, because Greg has such good resources in China that we could take your idea, and I would use my know-how in design and in engineering, and his know-how in design. He had a very famous clothing line in the 90s. He was wildly successful, really good designer. And we took that and kind of melded them together. And so if you came to us with an idea, we would take it, we would design, develop, manufacture, and package it for you. So I would design all your packaging for you, whether it was either retail or to the consumer. And that's how we set off to grow our business. So a big furniture company I was making packaging for was selling leather sofas into Costco. If you remember back then, they had the nail heads on them, really fancy, all leather, overstuffed type couches they sold into Costco. This was in 04, 05, 06. And I had designed not patented, I didn't patent it, but I designed a very unique type of packaging that would hold a couch, a chair, or a love seat all in the same package. And it would reduce the cost of the packaging for the manufacturer by 35%, and it would fill up a truck. It would cube out a diesel truck trailer exactly based off the orders they had. So I helped them design and cube out a truck. Well, another Italian furniture company was starting to sell furniture in the U.S. Reached out to them and asked them where they got their packaging. So they called me, referred to me, and I started doing all the packaging for this group out of Italy. And I set up multiple locations around the country to deliver the packaging to, meet the sofas there, unload the sofas, package the sofas, palletize them, and reload them on trucks and send them out to their retail centers where they were being sold, which was Costco was one of their customers. And I did that in 5 locations around the country, and I set that up my very first few months when I started Spectrum.
How did you guys get into medical devices?
Yeah, great question. I had a really good friend of mine who we'd been working with and developing products with and for, had got a job to run and launch a DNA project at Ancestry.com. And he came to me and said, hey, we want to launch this thing where you use saliva to build your family tree through genealogy by using DNA. I thought it was a great idea. They brought a device to me, and they brought the packaging to me and said, we want you to develop this packaging that will enhance our customer experience. Direct to consumer, we want the customer to open it up and be wowed. Kind of like when you open up your iPhone or your Apple laptop. They wanted to be wowed. And that, at that time, and still is, was the gold standard in packaging. But they wanted to do it at a discount, like everybody does. Packaging is always the last on the budget. Excuse me. So I set off to do that. But I started looking through the product and dissecting it, and I said, if you really want to enhance your customer experience, you really should design a different saliva collection device for your consumer. This one is janky. It did not work well. It leaked, and it wasn't intuitive. And after some deliberating with their team, he came back and said, okay, you have a challenge. You can design us a new product. So I set out to do that, and I designed our saliva collection devices we have today.
You got to keep the patent on that?
We have many patents on it, yeah. We have utility patent, we have a design patent, we have a patent on the preservation solution that preserves the DNA. We can go into that later if you want. But so that was in 2012. It took us about 18 months, 17 months to design. That was the first of 2012. And to let you know, when we talk about 0 to 120 million, I was in 2012, 2011. We had some really good success early on. We were the largest importer of glass bottles in the country. I was moving 60 containers a week of glass into the U.S. for wine bottles. We were selling about 50 million wine bottles a year in 08, 09. And then the market collapsed in 08. But packaging and the customers we had lagged about a year or two. We were about $1 a day away from being out of business in 2012. I had an employee embezzle $350,000 from me. Wow. And this will go back to the culture discussion that we talk about. My partner said this employee was a terrible employee, and she was the office tattletale. And my partner liked that. He said, you can't put a price on somebody who has your back. And while she had our back, she was embezzling all of our money. So she took 100% of our operating capital. We had no money, none. We had owed our vendors because she was using our vendors' invoices as a way to pay herself. So fast forward, and we're working with Ancestry, and we developed this, and we launched it in November of 2013. Really exciting. We worked our guts out to do it. We used third-party manufacturers to do all the work for us. We used design engineers to develop the product, and organic chemists to help us make the preservation solution to preserve the DNA, the saliva. And we launched that in 2013. And I myself went with my truck and loaded the truck from the kitting supplier and drove it to the fulfillment house myself, the very first order. And our orders were supposed to be 20,000 kits a month for the first year, 20 to 25,000. We did 44,000 our first month. We did 44,000 our second. We did 60 our third, 80 our fourth, and it kept going up from there. So that was in November. We could not get our suppliers to move fast enough. So I proposed to my business partner, I want to bring in our own kitting and packaging in-house. And so we set off to do that. And in January, we launched our own kitting facility in a really small place in Salt Lake. And then that grew. And later that year, 6 months later, we'd moved into a building. We were doing it all of ourselves in house. And before, we just third-partied everything because we were just an office like this. We didn't want to have own and manage that, because if you have equipment and machines and people, and if they're not working, you're losing money, right? So you have to keep that cog moving. And so I had to sell my business partner on the concept. And so I set off and built that for our company. And that was wildly successful. Ancestry was wildly successful with it. And we were up in 2018, we got up to 1 million kits a month.
Oh my.
1 million kits a month. And that year we did 47 million in revenue.
So what's your heritage?
Greek and Scottish. Greek and Scottish.
So tell us about, we talked about culture. What role did culture play in you guys getting to 120 million?
Yeah, so I'll go back from, to keep it short, but I'll go back to the beginning. When we started hiring employees, we thought that we could hire 6s, 7s, and 8s in quality. And we thought we could coach them up to be 9s and 10s. And what we learned was you can't coach up a 7. A 7's going to be a 7. A as they evolve, you can see that they might be a 6 and they could be an 8, but they're a 7, right? They're on average a 7. So we hired 6s and 7s and 8s, and we struggled, and we did okay, but the majority of the revenue was coming from myself or my partner, and it was never from the people we hired. So what happened was in 2012, when we were about out of business, we cleaned house. We got rid of everybody, and we started over, and we hired only 10s. Because we figured that if we hired a 10, it would make our job easier, and 2, it would help drive success because everybody had that successful mindset. So 1, I would never hire down because you're going to spend more time coaching up than you are just doing the job itself. So that was one of the first expensive educations I learned. You talk about dropping out of college. I think we all, being entrepreneurs, have the most expensive education ever. Dropping out of college was, staying in college probably would have been easier than starting a business and running a business. Would you not agree?
Yeah.
Totally agree.
Yeah. So we set off to rewrite what Spectrum was and how we would do business. So we started hiring people, and we started hiring great people, really, really good people. And the second thing I wanted to do when I did this was, as I spoke about your book you have here on the shelf, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I use this phrase a lot is, you don't take chances in business, you take risks, because risks are calculated, chances are without thought, right? And that's something that I tried to work and implement my entire career, and it's something that became stronger in me as success started to happen. And when you hire people and you know that you have to hire them and trust them to do what is right for the business, you want to make sure you have the right person doing that job. Are you going to hire somebody who is a 5 and hoping that they do it right, taking a chance? Or am I going to hire the right person who's a 10 and knowing that I can take that risk? A risk is calculated. I put thought into it. I brought the right person on, and I self-empowered them to run and manage the business as if it was their business, that portion of the business, I should say. And that's how I set off to build the culture. That was my foundation. And from there, it was, I wanted people to, I know I've done this, and you guys have all done this when you had jobs that you despised. What was the reason you hated it so much? You knew the work was hard. You weren't afraid of the hard work. It was how you were treated. It was how you were treated by the people who were above you and how you were treated by the people you worked next to. And I wanted people to come to work every day knowing that they could, that the job was going to be a hard job, but I wanted them to come to work knowing that they could put their feet on the ground and be excited about the job they had, could be excited about the people they worked next to. And this wasn't kumbaya. We wouldn't all just hug it out every day. We knew that, you don't get along with everybody you work well with, but if you had great synergies with people, you didn't have to like them, but you wanted to work with them because you knew that they brought something tangible to the table. So I wanted to make sure that I assembled a team that was very powerful in each of their own departments in their own right, self-empowered, self-driven, and entrepreneurial-minded. And then I wanted to make sure that they weren't micromanaged. I don't micromanage anybody, even my salespeople. I never made them fill out a sales sheet, because you are a victim of your own demise and a victim of your own success, right? So I would tell them, you can't hide. You couldn't hide. So if you're not going to be a successful salesperson, I would know it, because you would have no commission. So there's really no reason. You either work hard and earn something, or you don't work hard and you earn nothing, and then you weed yourself out of the business. So I wanted people who were passionate and compassionate at the same time. I wanted them to be knowing that they could work well with each of their departments, and I wanted them to be excited about coming to work. And if I knew you were excited about coming to work, you weren't afraid to come early and you weren't afraid to stay late. And I didn't have to tell people, hey, I need you to work 30 minutes extra today. You knew if you had to work 30 minutes extra, and you knew if you needed to take tomorrow off, you could take tomorrow off with confidence because you were going to be supported by your teammates.
Bill, you mentioned that you set out to rewrite what Spectrum was. Mm-hmm. And then as part of that, you kind of cleaned up and hired a bunch of 10s. There, in the book Good to Great, it talks about first who, then where. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about how putting the right people on the bus helped shape what Spectrum became? Like maybe some things that happened.
Yeah, I can confidently say that Spectrum would have never have gotten to 120 million if I did not bring all-stars to the team. We would have never have won the World Series if, and I use that phrase because we ended up working with Major League Baseball and we ended up taking the company to the World Series. So
Let's go.
It was pretty cool. Yeah, it's hard because it is a reflection of you and your character when you hire a 5. And it's also a reflection of you and your character when you hire a 10. I had a friend who said he was never afraid to fire people. He actually enjoyed it. And I was the opposite of that. I really wanted people to want to come to work and work hard. And I never wanted to fire somebody. I would always try to find or work their potential and feel what their value add was something that really brought a tangible to the company. And what happens is the strong eat the weak. You know, I had a fulfillment department our packaging department with 50, 100, 200, 300, we got up to 850 employees. And we paid our employees through incentive programs. And we had employees that were non-skilled laborers making $50,000 a year and buying cars and buying homes because they could have, they knew the harder they worked, the more they would get paid. We paid on piecework. We paid a base, paid a good base, but then we paid a piecework, and then we built these teams, and we built these super teams, and we would create the World Series, and we'd create the Soccer World Cup, and we'd put signs in the warehouse, and we'd have these teams compete against each other and win awards and do these things, and we'd really champion the employees in the warehouse, and it got to be where they were making great money. And what were they doing? They were making me great money because their throughput was higher, their quality level was higher, and I knew I was getting the very best out of each of these employees. And if you were on a team, if 3 of us were on a team and one of us wasn't pulling our weight, you would eventually work yourself off that team. The pressure would be so immense by the success of your team that you would eventually not be working there anymore. So I didn't have to fire people. Good people rose up and bad people disappeared.
Were there any culture killers? I know the state of Spectrum is different today than it was 2021, 2020.
Yeah, there are culture killers for sure.
Can you talk to those?
Yeah, gossip. Gossip is a culture killer. And what do you do with gossip as a leader? I actually had a conversation about this on Monday with the people at Spectrum. Gossip is something that helps form a negative opinion about another employee. And what it does is it sours not only the team, but it sours productivity. So what happens is you start focusing on the things you dislike about the person because somebody else has poisoned the well. And you're not as effective as you were. The person that's being talked about isn't effective because they're busy defending themselves. So it creates this inner turmoil. And so I would always kill rumors and kill negative talk. And as I said, we didn't sit around and hug each other and sing Kumbaya, but what I did is I would try to talk positivity, and I would bring people in who were having negative conversations and just sit them down and talk to them. My door was always open. I'm very approachable, and I wanted to make sure that I wasn't the boss behind the door. I was the guy working in the trenches with them. So I got dirty with them, I worked hard with them, and they felt like they could confide in me. So when people came to confide in me, I would talk to them about the situation and the things they were doing and the things that were happening. And it was easy for me to ignore the gossip. I didn't ignore the gossip. I heard the gossip, but I did not let it perpetuate. And that's one of the things that I felt like that held some strength. When you have leaders that are helping perpetuate the gossip, that's really is a giant culture killer. And you have to remove those people, no matter how effective they are. You have to do something about it. As much as I don't like firing people, I either try to change departments, change structure, because I know that person's highly effective. And if they become the cancer, you have to remove it. You have to. And, that's one of the, I don't relish in that spot, but it's one of the things you have to do as a leader, is making sure that the entire team is the best it can be by removing somebody who is not good for the team.
Can bringing on a private equity firm ever be a culture neutral?
Say that?
Can bringing on a private equity firm investment ever be a culture neutral move?
Yes.
Or is it almost every conversation I hear, it's a culture negative?
It is a culture negative. No,
Can it
never
ever be neutral
No.
or positive?
I don't know if it can be positive. I've not.
Have you ever seen that in nature? Actually, there's one story that comes to mind.
I'll say this. I have not had a lot of success with private equity. The success I have had is a double-edged sword. I got a big windfall. It helped prop our company up, but the type of support and value add that I expected from them, I did not get. So maybe that's on me for expecting something that did not happen. And so,
what did you expect and what did you actually get?
Yeah, I expected them to help grow and drive business by bringing on assets or other companies to bolt on to help us grow, or using their portfolio companies to help drive and grow our business by bringing in other business to us. That did not happen. One thing I do appreciate them is they're very hands-off. They loved who we are, who we were, and they let us run us as we were. But they were there to, what a private equity is strong as, bleed the company dry and leave it for dead. If it doesn't grow on its own and makes money for them, great. If it does grow, great. They're going to win either way, because they'll just recap and take all the money out.
How does it not? How can they win if they gut it and leave it for dead?
Well,
because aren't they aligned with you that they want the long-term value of that company to increase?
Sure, yeah, but they want you. In my situation, they wanted that to happen without any input or any help from themselves, but they put a CEO in place to watch over the hen house, I guess I should say. I'm trying to be careful how I talk.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I don't need to hold back anything I feel, but I'm just trying to be diplomatic in regards to me not being completely biased.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I have a question about, as we're getting close to the end, I have my classic question. Do you have any before I ask it?
No, you can go for it.
If you were to be able to sit across from 26-year-old, 3-kid Bill, what would you say?
Keep working your ass off. I was never afraid of work. And you can never be afraid of work. I was a furniture mover. I was working hours and hours a day, running and carrying stairs. Strong back, weak mind is what I used to say. I've carried pianos that you guys would be blown away that I could carry. I've carried fireproof safes up a flight of stairs. I've moved stuff for people that have been, they treated me. I'll tell you this one family we were moving, they were going on a mission. The parents were, and they had this big, beautiful home up in Sandy, and I was young and I didn't have much, and I lived way out west, and there's this big house in Sandy, and they had an ice cream parlor in their basement, and they were very wealthy. And I went to take my water cup to go get a drink of water out of her sink, and she said, "There's a hose outside." And we used to say that the garbage man picks up the waste. We move everything that they cherish, but treat us worse than the man that drives by in the garbage truck. And I never stopped. I mean, and I'm not saying that I'm wildly driven, but I just, I'll tell you, I gave a piece of advice to a guy. I was leaving a place and I was driving one of my cars that's an expensive car, and he said, "How does one afford this car? What did you do? Did you go to college?" I said, "I didn't go to college." I said, "But I worked my ass off." And I said, "This is my advice that I would give to myself then and give it to now, is no matter what job you have, be proud of the job you have and be prouder of the job you do. work your guts out. Like this guy was a backhoe operator. He said, I drive a backhoe. I said, you drive that backhoe so good that your boss makes you the supervisor of the team. You drive it so well and learn it and know it so well that you help your boss buy the next backhoe. Those are the things you start to do. You become your own leader in yourself. You don't have to go and tell your boss you want to be the leader. You show your boss you are the leader. No matter what job it is, I don't care. I've worked throwing freight at CF. I threw container loads of Levi's that went to stores, JCPenney's and all those stores back 25, 30 years ago. I spent 8 hours in one trailer separating to go to all these stores. 8 hours. But I got the trailer done, and I got it 100% correct, and nobody watched me do it. Not one person. I had no accountability. I just ran. I could have done my hours, done half the trailer, and went home. But that's not who I am. I had to make sure I did it to something that was satisfactory to me. And 100% is nothing less than satisfactory.
Bill, this has been amazing. Thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, it's been fun. I'm very honored to be here. Thanks.
What a treat.
Such a treat.
Thank you.
It's a wrap.